The scratching sound lasted only seconds, but to Marcus Chen, watching the security footage for the third time, it seemed to stretch into eternity. The metallic scrape of key against paint, deliberate and vindictive, leaving a jagged line across the gleaming black surface of his 3-week-old Tesla Model 3. His stomach clenched as he watched the blonde woman, mid-40s, designer sunglasses perched on her head, Lululemon outfit that probably cost more than some people's monthly rent, drag her house key along the driver's side door before strutting away with his self-satisfied smirk. "I can't believe this," Marcus muttered, pausing the footage. The mall security guard beside him shifted uncomfortably. "People, man," the guard said, shaking his head. "They think they own the world." Marcus ran his hands through his dark hair, still processing what he was seeing. He had only gone into the Westlake shopping center for 30 minutes, just long enough to pick up his sister's birthday present. When he returned to find the ugly gash running the length of his car, his first thought had been to check the mall's security cameras. He never expected they'd actually capture such clear footage of the culprit. 45 minutes earlier, Marcus had pulled into the parking spot legitimately. It was a crowded Saturday afternoon at the upscale suburban shopping center, and parking spots were scarce. He'd circled twice before finally seeing a spot open up near the north entrance. As he'd waited for the previous car to pull out, he noticed another vehicle, a white Range Rover, idling at the opposite end of the aisle, but thought nothing of it. When the spot cleared, Marcus pulled in smoothly, checked his phone for his sister's gift details, and headed inside. What the security footage revealed next made the incident even more infuriating. The Range Rover had apparently been waiting for the same spot, but from the opposite direction. Its driver, the blonde woman, had been waiting out of Marcus's line of sight. The footage clearly showed her furious reaction as Marcus claimed the spot, honking repeatedly and then parking haphazardly in a loading zone. She'd emerged from her vehicle, gesturing angrily toward Marcus's now empty Tesla, before stomping into the mall. But the story didn't end there. 20 minutes later, the security camera captured her return. This time, she approached his car deliberately, glancing around the parking lot, though failing to notice the unobtrusive security camera mounted above the mall entrance. That's when she pulled out her keys and enacted her revenge. "Do you recognize her?" Marcus asked the security guard, who was still watching the screen with a grimace. "Can't say I do personally," the guard replied, "but she shops here regularly. Management might know her." Marcus nodded, his initial shock giving way to something else. He wasn't prone to confrontation, had always prided himself on keeping cool under pressure. At 32, he built a successful software development business by being methodical, patient, and thinking several steps ahead. Those same qualities were kicking in now. "I'd like a copy of this footage, please," he said quietly. The guard hesitated. "We don't usually release security footage except to police. Mall policy." "I'll be filing a police report," Marcus assured him. "This is willful property damage. That's a crime." As the guard made a call to his supervisor, Marcus stepped outside to examine his car again. The scratch was even worse in daylight, a deep, jagged line that had cut through the paint to the metal beneath. The repair would cost thousands, not to mention devaluing his new car. But it wasn't about the money. It was the sheer entitlement of it, the casual malice that assumed there would be no consequences. Marcus took several photos of the damage, his mind already mapping out the next steps. File a police report, contact his insurance. And then what? The woman's face was clear on the footage. Would the police track her down? Would she be charged? Or would this become yet another incident that faded into bureaucratic oblivion? As he waited for the guard to return with the verdict on the footage, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his sister thanking him for the birthday gift. The irony wasn't lost on him, his good deed punished by a stranger's petty revenge. What Marcus didn't know then was that his decision to pursue this case would lead to consequences neither he nor the key-wielding woman could have anticipated. And it would all play out in ways that would extend far beyond a simple scratch on a Tesla. 3 days after the incident, Marcus sat in a cramped waiting area of the Westlake Police Department, scrolling through emails on his phone while occasionally glancing at the institutional clock on the wall. Officer Diaz had promised him just 5 more minutes nearly 20 minutes ago, but Marcus understood the reality of overworked police departments. He'd come prepared with patience and a full battery on his laptop. When Officer Diaz finally emerged from the back offices, she carried a thin manila folder and a tired smile. "Mr. Chen, sorry for the wait," she said, gesturing for him to follow her to a small interview room. "Property crimes aren't exactly prioritized around here, but this one's interesting." Marcus settled into an uncomfortable plastic chair across from her. "Interesting how?" Officer Diaz, a woman in her mid-30s with observant eyes that missed nothing, opened the folder. "We identified your car buyer, Margaret Whitfield, 46, resident of Oakwood Estates. Know the area?" Marcus nodded. Oakwood Estates was one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the county, where houses started at $2 million and went up from there. She has no prior record, Officer Diaz continued, not even a parking ticket, pays her taxes on time. Married to Richard Whitfield, he's some executive at biotech industries. 2 kids in private school. She looked up at Marcus. Not your typical vandal. Does that make it less illegal? Marcus asked, trying to keep the edge from his voice. Officer Diaz's expression softened slightly. Not at all. Just provides context. We contacted Mrs. Whitfield yesterday. When confronted with the video evidence, she admitted to damaging your vehicle. Marcus felt a surge of vindication. So she'll be charged? That's where it gets complicated. Her husband showed up with their attorney about an hour after we called her in. They've offered to pay for all damages plus an additional $5,000 for your inconvenience if you agree not to press charges. Marcus blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected this turn of events. The repair estimate is $7,800, he said slowly. So they're offering nearly $13,000 total. Officer Diaz nodded. It's a generous offer. The alternative is you press charges, she likely gets probation and still has to pay restitution for the repairs. But it drags out for months in court. Marcus leaned back, considering. The money would more than cover the repairs and the extra $5,000 was substantial. But something about it felt wrong. They're buying their way out of consequences, he said finally. Officer Diaz maintained professional neutrality. It's not uncommon with first-time offenders, especially when they're wealthy, Marcus finished for her. When the damage is purely financial, she corrected gently. Look, Mr. Chen, I've been doing this job long enough to know that the justice system rarely delivers the satisfaction people hope for. If you press charges, this case will drag on for months. Mrs. Whitfield will likely get community service and be ordered to pay restitution anyway. The only difference is you'll have to wait much longer to get your car fixed. Marcus mulled this over. He thought about the footage he'd watched repeatedly, the calculated way Margaret Whitfield had damaged his property because she felt entitled to a parking space, the way she looked around to make sure no one was watching before committing her petty act of revenge. What would you do? He asked Officer Diaz. She closed the folder. Officially, I can't advise you either way. Unofficially, she hesitated. There are no perfect solutions here, just trade-offs. As Marcus left the police station, the weight of the decision pressed on him. He called his sister, Elaine, who had always been his sounding board. $13,000 is a lot of money, Elaine said after he explained the situation. But I get why you're hesitating. It's the principle. Exactly, Marcus replied, squinting in the bright afternoon sun as he walked to his car, now repaired with the rental insurance had provided. People like Margaret Whitfield go through life thinking they can do whatever they want and then write a check to make it go away. So what are you going to do? Marcus paused before answering. I'm not sure yet, but I'm thinking about it differently now. This isn't just about my car anymore. That evening, while working on a client project, Marcus found himself distracted. He opened a new browser tab and searched for Margaret Whitfield Oakwood. Within minutes, he had found her, LinkedIn profile, charity gala photos in the local society pages, and most interestingly, her position as board president of the Oakwood Homeowners Association. This is highly unusual, Richard Whitfield said, his lawyer nodding in agreement beside him. They sat across from Marcus in a conference room at the law offices of Brennan, Walsh, and Associates, the polished mahogany table between them gleaming under recessed lighting. Margaret Whitfield sat next to her husband, her posture rigid, hands clasped tightly in front of her. She hadn't made eye contact with Marcus since entering the room. Perhaps, Marcus replied evenly, but so is keying someone's car over a parking space. Richard Whitfield's jaw tightened. He was a tall man with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to getting his way. We've offered more than fair compensation. I don't understand why we're still discussing this. Officer Diaz, who had agreed to attend the meeting as a neutral third party, spoke up from her position at the end of the table. Mr. Chen has the right to consider alternatives to the initial offer. Marcus slid a document across the table. This is my counter-proposal. The lawyer, a thin man named Walsh with wire-rimmed glasses, picked up the document and scanned it. His eyebrows rose slightly. This is creative. What is it? Richard demanded, reaching for the paper. Marcus explained as Richard read. Instead of paying me directly, I'm proposing that you donate the full amount, $12,800, to the Westlake Community Center's after-school program for underprivileged youth. Margaret looked up, confusion evident on her face. The community center? Yes, Marcus continued. They're severely underfunded. The money would provide art supplies, sports equipment, and educational materials for kids who don't have the advantages of private education. Richard frowned, studying the document. And in return, I won't press charges. The legal matter ends here. The lawyer leaned toward the Whitfield, speaking in a low voice. It's still financially advantageous compared to legal proceedings and potential reputational damage. Margaret shifted in her seat. Is that all? She asked, her voice carrying a note of suspicion. Marcus met her eyes directly for the first time. Not quite. There's one more condition. He placed a second document on the table. I want 20 hours of your personal time, Mrs. Whitfield. Volunteering at that same community center. The room fell silent. Margaret's face flushed. That's absurd. I have commitments. Board meetings, charity functions. One afternoon a week for 5 weeks, Marcus said. 4 hours each session working directly with the kids. Richard started to object, but Margaret held up her hand, stopping him. Why? She asked Marcus. Why this instead of the money? Marcus considered his words carefully. I've been thinking about accountability. Real accountability. You build a public persona around community standards and setting examples. I saw your Neighbor of the Year interview. Margaret's flush deepened. Money is easy for you, Marcus continued. Writing a check doesn't change anything. But time, that's different. Time is the same for everyone, regardless of wealth. And these kids, they could benefit from someone with your organizational skills. The lawyer whispered something to Richard, who nodded slowly. And if we refuse? Richard asked. Officer Diaz spoke up again. Then Mr. Chen can proceed with pressing charges for criminal vandalism, and the case will proceed through normal channels. Margaret suddenly stood up, causing everyone to look at her. I'll do it. Richard turned to her in surprise. Margaret, we should discuss. No, she said firmly. He's right. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of resentment and something harder to identify, perhaps respect. I made a mistake. A stupid, impulsive mistake that I'm deeply embarrassed about. I'll do the volunteer hours. 3 days later, Marcus received an email confirmation that the donation had been made to the Westlake Community Center. Attached was a schedule showing Margaret Whitfield's first volunteer session would begin the following Tuesday. Curious despite himself, Marcus drove to the community center that Tuesday afternoon. He parked across the street, watching as Margaret's white Range Rover pulled into the parking lot precisely at 3:45 p.m. She emerged wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that looked jarringly out of place in the modest neighborhood. Marcus observed as she hesitated at the entrance, squared her shoulders, and walked inside. He hadn't planned to follow, but something compelled him to see this through. He waited 15 minutes before crossing the street and entering the building himself. The community center was a hive of activity, with children of various ages engaged in different programs throughout the open space. Marcus spotted Margaret in the art corner. 6 weeks had passed since Margaret Whitfield began her volunteer work at the community center. Marcus had not returned since that first day, deciding it was better to let the arrangement play out without his supervision. His Tesla had been fully repaired, the incident fading into the background of his busy life as he focused on a major software launch for his company. He might have forgotten about Margaret entirely if not for the email that appeared in his inbox on a rainy Thursday morning. Mr. Chen, it began formally. I completed the required volunteer hours at the Westlake Community Center as per our agreement. Carmen Rodriguez has signed the verification form, which I've attached. Regards, Margaret Whitfield. Marcus hadn't expected any communication from her. The legal matter was settled, the conditions met. There was no reason for further contact. Yet as he stared at the brief message, he felt strangely unsatisfied. Was that it? 20 hours completed like a checkbox on a to-do list? He was about to close the email when he noticed a second attachment, a document titled Reflections.pif. Curiosity piqued, he opened it. These thoughts are voluntary, the document began. Our agreement required only my time, not my words, but I find myself needing to articulate what these past weeks have taught me. Marcus leaned forward in his chair, surprised. I've spent most of my adult life in spaces where people look, think, and live like me, Margaret had written. My volunteer work at the center placed me directly in the path of children whose daily realities I've been privileged to ignore. They have taught me more than I could possibly have taught them. The document continued for 2 pages describing specific children, moments of connection, and realizations about privilege and perspective. Margaret wrote about a boy named Dean who walked 2 miles to the center each day because his mother worked double shifts, and a girl named Lucia who helped translate for her Spanish-speaking grandmother. She described learning that 3 of the children were homeless, staying in the shelter across town, yet still came to the center each day for stability and support. Marcus read the reflection twice, trying to reconcile the thoughtful, introspective writing with the woman who had vindictively keyed his car. The transformation seemed too dramatic, too convenient. Was this just another performance, a calculated effort to rehabilitate her image? He decided to find out. That afternoon, he called Carmen Rodriguez. Carmen, it's Marcus Chen. I received an email from Margaret Whitfield saying she completed her volunteer hours. She did. Carmen confirmed, 20 hours exactly, plus an extra afternoon last week when one of our regular volunteers called in sick. Marcus paused. Extra time? That wasn't part of the agreement. No, she chose to come in on her own, Carmen said. She's actually been quite helpful, especially with grant writing. She has connections we never would have accessed otherwise. Grant writing? Marcus echoed, confused. Carmen laughed softly. Oh, yes. After she got over her initial discomfort, she turned out to be quite resourceful. Did you know she used to work in nonprofit development before she married? She's helping us apply for a community improvement grant that could fund a much-needed renovation of our facilities. Marcus absorbed this information silently, his skepticism wavering. In fact, Carmen continued, she's here now if you want to talk to her yourself. Before Marcus could protest, he heard Carmen calling Margaret's name. Moments later, Margaret's voice came through the phone. Mr. Chen, she said, her tone guarded but not hostile. I assume you received my email. I did, Marcus replied, including your reflection. There was a brief silence. I meant what I wrote, she said finally. Carmen tells me you're helping with grant applications. It's the least I can do, Margaret said. These children deserve better facilities, and it turns out I still remember how to write a compelling proposal. Another silence stretched between them. Marcus struggled to reconcile his lingering resentment with this new information. I'm not expecting forgiveness, Margaret continued when he didn't speak. What I did was inexcusable, regardless of how much I've learned since then. Marcus found himself asking a question he hadn't planned. Why did you do it? Key my car, I mean. You must have known it was wrong. He heard Margaret inhale sharply. I've asked myself that question many times these past weeks, she said slowly. The simple answer is that I was angry. You took my parking spot after I'd been waiting. But the real answer is more complicated. She paused. I acted that way because I could, because I've rarely faced consequences for my actions, because I've spent years cultivating an existence where my inconvenience matters more than other people's property or... The Art for Heart auction exceeded everyone's expectations. The Westlake Mall's central court had been transformed for the evening, with children's artwork displayed gallery style and soft lighting creating an unexpectedly elegant atmosphere. Marcus arrived 20 minutes after the event had begun, surprised to find the space already filled with attendees. We've never had this kind of turnout, Carmen exclaimed when she spotted him hurrying over with barely contained excitement. Margaret managed to get the event featured in the County Tribune and convinced half of Oakwood Estates to attend. Marcus scanned the crowd, noting the mix of people from different parts of the community, affluent couples in evening wear mingling with teachers, families, and community members. Near the makeshift stage, Margaret stood in animated conversation with a group of corporate-looking attendees, gesturing toward a large display of children's art. Those are executives from biotech industries, Carmen explained, following his gaze. Margaret's husband's connections. They're discussing a corporate sponsorship program for our after-school activities. She's really thrown herself into this, Marcus observed. Carmen nodded. People can surprise you. Sometimes they just need the right push. She gave him a meaningful look. The kids are over there if you'd like to meet them. Some of the artists are very eager to meet the mysterious Mr. Chen. Marcus found himself surrounded by enthusiastic children moments later, each wanting to show him their artwork and explain their creative process in endearing detail. Zoe, the 7-year-old creator of the cloud painting, tugged on his sleeve until he crouched down to her level. Mrs. Margaret told us you're the reason she came to help us, Zoe said, her brown eyes serious behind pink-framed glasses. She said you taught her about consequences. Did she? Marcus asked, surprised. Zoe nodded solemnly. She said sometimes people do mean things because they forget how to see other people, but then sometimes they remember, and that's when they can change. Before Marcus could respond, the sound of a microphone being tapped drew everyone's attention to the small stage where Margaret now stood. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began, her voice steady and warm. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been standing here. 6 months ago, I was a very different person, someone who believed her convenience and comfort mattered more than others. A hush fell over the crowd. I made a terrible mistake, Margaret continued. I damaged someone's property out of petty revenge. It was caught on camera. She paused, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd. But instead of pressing charges, the person I wronged chose a different path. He created an opportunity for growth, not just for me, but for this community center. Marcus felt the weight of eyes turning toward him, but Margaret continued before the moment became uncomfortable. Tonight isn't about my redemption story. It's about these incredible children and their resilience. It's about the $47,000 we've already raised tonight that will fund a complete renovation of the center's facilities. Applause erupted, with Carmen clasping her hands to her mouth in shock at the figure. And I'm thrilled to announce, Margaret continued when the applause subsided, that Biotech Industries has agreed to match every dollar raised tonight, bringing our total to just over $94,000. The crowd erupted again, with Carmen actually bursting into tears. Children jumped up and down, high-fiving each other and their parents. As the auction proceeded, Marcus found himself bidding on and winning Zoe's cloud painting. After paying, he wandered to a quieter corner of the event space, taking in the scene with a sense of wonder at how events had unfolded from that moment of anger in a parking lot. "I hope you're planning to frame that," Margaret said, approaching with 2 glasses of sparkling water. She handed one to Marcus. "Zoe will expect to see it prominently displayed if she ever visits your office." Marcus accepted the drink. "I was thinking it would look good in our reception area." A reminder that mistakes can turn into something worthwhile. Margaret nodded, understanding the weight of his words. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the successful event unfold around them. "Your husband seems supportive," Marcus observed, noting Richard Whitfield deep in conversation with Carmen about renovation plans. "He's learning too," Margaret said with a small smile. "Our whole household is. Our teenagers think I had some kind of midlife awakening." She laughed softly. "Maybe I have." "What happens after the renovation?" Marcus asked. "Will you stay involved with the center?" Margaret's expression grew thoughtful. "Actually, I've been offered a position, part-time development director. Using my old nonprofit skills again." She turned to face him directly.